Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, June 24th, 2026, and today we're going to shout out some soil health principles. We'll talk succession planting tips, how to find good, safe mulch, and why to avoid disturbance within reason. So let's do it. All right, happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope your weeks are halfway through in the best of ways. Things are nice here. It's been mild these last 10 days or so. Definitely no complaints there, though the summer heat looks like it's about to finally show itself. So more complaints to come, I guess. It made for nice harvest weather yesterday, though, and for that, I'm always happy. The garden is chugging along fairly well, all things considered, and by things, I mean the World Cup distractions. Last night, I also had a really fun time with our local community. We're hosting a little 3v3 soccer tournament at the fields, and because I was reffing for like 2.5 hours, I didn't get home until well after my normal bedtime. However, multiple people that night told me how much they appreciated the event and that it was really nice to see the community coming together so often in the summer for soccer. Again, for me, the coaching soccer thing is not about the soccer, it's about the kids and the community. I have used soccer my whole life to make friends, and this is probably going to blow you away. This could be like the premise of a horror story. I went to 5 different middle schools. I've used soccer my entire life to make friends, and it's kind of amazing to see that continue well into my 30 teens. Community is this weird, ethereal thing that isn't always easy to put a finger on, but being involved with something that I love locally, like soccer and coaching, means I meet everyone in our community that has that common ground, and that's very cool. I'd be curious to know what farming or non-farming things you do to get involved with your own communities. I don't know if they still do it, but Frith Farm in Maine used to host a burger night on their farm for their community. We don't have a good space for that sort of thing here on our farm, but community engagement obviously doesn't have to be soccer related. It should involve some soccer if I'm involved. There are a million different ways to do it, and if you can make it about food and farming and ecology, that would be cool too. Maybe even food, farming, and ecology and soccer. That's a thing. It's always a little harder to pull off in rural areas, I know that, but if you build it, they will come, right? Anyway, what we're going to do with our typical compilation Wednesday today is cover those 3 classic soil health principles with 3 different topics. We'll talk succession planting tips for the keep the garden planted part. We'll discuss how to find good, safe mulch to keep the garden covered with, and why we avoid disturbance within reason to keep the soil as undisturbed as we can. As always, we would love to see or hear what you all are up to right now in your gardens, so let us know, or better yet, drop us a 20-second farm video clip to Dropbox or Drive, and then just share that with farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Otherwise, here's a younger me putting the principles of soil health into practice. Enjoy. Today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member IBTaylor123, who writes, quote, thank you for making this program. I always enjoy listening, and I appreciate your willingness to dive into such a wide array of topics, from pepper plant nursery specifics to wool mulch or compost teas. One broad idea I have a hard time getting my mind around is crop planting, and maybe more specifically succession planting. How does one stagger their planting so that they don't end up with a glut or crops one week and nothing the next? How does one manage their nursery production so they have transplants ready when they need them during the season? From my experience of 2 years working for other farmers, and from what I can find online, it seems that the answer might just be, it depends. It seems to me there are so many factors to consider, like shortening or lengthening daylight hours and wild temperature swings. Parenthetically, they say I also live in 6B Midwest. The end of the episode from 13th December 2024 was helpful as an overview, and I am wondering if you had any more specifics to offer. Would you explain how you go about this for your farm, and is there any solid advice that is applicable across zones? Thank you again, end quote. Okay, so great question, love it. And well, unfortunately, when it comes to successions and greenhouses or plantings, it does indeed depend. All right, so let's go back to that episode you referenced. That was the episode, which I will link in the show notes, about a simple trick for crop planting. It's not as simple, I guess, as it is straightforward. Basically, you look at what you want to harvest each week and work your way backwards. So for storage crops, that's easy. You look at all the potatoes you wish to have for the entire season and plant the amount that you will get that will give you that yield at the beginning of the season, and then you just harvest it and store it and use it as you need it. But for successions of fresh crops, like say beet bunches, or even a cut and come again product like lettuce, how does that work? Every crop is a little different. So let's just do a few different crops. Okay, so take fresh beets with greens on to start. In the early spring, you can plant roughly 3 weeks worth of beets at a time, meaning you don't need to restart the beets for 3 weeks because they will hold relatively well in the field. As you get closer to the summer, you will have to start the number of beets you need every week because they won't hold as well in the high heat or they will get too big. In the fall, you can plant all of your winter beets because they will hold well in the field. And then when the frosts start to hit pretty hard, you can harvest and store them all. So that's beets. Fresh carrots are similar. Start 3 weeks, like we usually start 3 weeks worth in the early spring or 4. Then 3 weeks later, start another 2 to 3 weeks worth of carrots. I've talked about this before, but we'll plant like all of our short season carrots and at least 1 or 2 beds of longer season carrots. So like our 60-day carrots and our 80-day carrots at the same time. And that kind of spreads out that harvest. Then in the summer, start like 2 weeks worth every other week. Does that make sense? So you're basically planting for 2 weeks every 2 weeks. Then for the fall, when storage carrots come back into play, plant every carrot you will need for the fall bunches and winter storage all at once in the late summer. So like you're not planting those in succession. You're just planting them all at once because the bunches will come out at one time and then you can just get your storage carrots out whenever you need to or whenever you're ready to do it. So for something like radishes, this is slightly different because they grow so fast. So you'd start maybe 3 weeks worth in the late winter, like right now for us, and then no more than 2 weeks worth at a time through the summer because they will get too big and too pithy, especially those planted in May that will be ready around the summer solstice. I often skip radishes through that period just because the greens get giant and the roots are really small and often kind of pithy. Something like lettuce, I account for 2 cuttings in the early spring and really only account for 1 cutting all summer. Extra cuttings are a bonus. So in the late winter, I start trays every 2 weeks, and then in the summer, I start trays every week. Then in like late summer, I plant a bunch for the winter, but I start enough for the entire winter season because regrowth is really slow in the winter. So although I expect 3 cuttings, that 3rd cutting often doesn't come until March. So you will really have to math that out. Like you can't just expect 1 cutting every other week or something. You really have to expect like bed will take at least a month and a half to regrow in the winter. And then we usually replant the next round in late December if we're trying to have lettuce all winter. Clear as mud, right? The trick is just knowing how much of what you can harvest at what time and how much you can plant at one time without it getting too big. So, or bolting or whatever. So how much is the most you can plant at one time, either by the time of year or by the days to maturity of that crop. Easiest thing to do is just plant how much ever you need of those successive crops every week until you really dial it in. That will give you too much food at first, kind of like you mentioned, but also a lot of incentive to dial it in for your region, like take notes and get the data that you need. Like in a northern climate, summer lettuce may regrow a lot better for you than it does for us, and winter lettuce may be a lot slower for you than it is for us. So those are things that only you can know. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything, custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. Their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. All right, back to the show.
All right, so today I want to start a little bit of a mulch series. We talked a couple weeks ago about the importance of keeping the soil covered as much as possible, but one of the things I've said for many years is that you can't just like make recommendations like that without the how. So often when I was, coming up in this business, a phrase I don't think I've ever actually used for farming, but when we were coming up in this industry, I felt like there was a lot of philosophical guidance, like don't disturb the soil or use cover crops, but an insufficient amount of information about what the heck that even looks like. No one was telling us how to do it. Over the next couple or possibly next few weeks, we're going to talk about different mulches and the how in their implementation and employment, not just how to use them, I guess, but also how to find them, what to look for, what to ask the seller, because yes, mulches can be great for your gardens, but use the wrong mulch in the wrong situation, and you could wind up with contamination from seeds or chemicals or plastic or just really cold soil that's not very helpful to you. So today we'll talk about how to identify the mulches that you have available to you. This is important because you may have locally available mulches that I don't have access to where you are, wherever it is that you're located, or you may have mulches you can't even really use. So let's kick off this mulch series with exactly that, identifying your mulch options. First, there are several places / resources where you can figure out what is around locally. I recommend just reaching out to your local extension office to start and seeing if anyone they know is selling hay, straw, manure, or compost. Sometimes they may know someone who has a lot of straw, or sometimes the FSA employee themselves or the extension agent or whoever produces their own mulch. This is a great place to start, especially if you are new to an area. Also, Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace can be additional resources for just seeing what people have available. I mean, I'm assuming that I haven't been on Facebook in a while, but there are brokers and sellers and retailers out there as well who sell mulch. But the ideal thing, in my opinion, is to buy it directly from the farmer themselves, because that's when you can ask like pertinent questions about what the mulch might contain. If you tell a hay producer, for instance, that you are looking for a hay for a garden and you don't want to use it if it's been sprayed with a broadleaf herbicide, most farmers are going to be upfront with you about if they did or did not use that, like any sort of broadleaf herbicide, because one, they want future business, and two, most farmers are just decent folks. Like, they're not going to lie to you just to get, like $100 sale. I've had farmers straight up tell me they didn't want to sell me a product just out of fear that there may be some herbicide contamination, even though they felt like it was unlikely based on what they sprayed in the field. You may still decide you want to buy it. Just maybe they sprayed a pre-emergent or something and you're like, okay, well, that's not too bad. But it is good to ask them. Same for straw. If you find a source, you can ask them if they desiccated the crop for termination with an herbicide or if anything was sprayed post-emergent. Sometimes growers will spray a pre-emergent herbicide, like I said, which is not going to be as potent on the hay or straw as an herbicide sprayed later in the season directly onto what they will be harvesting. They may also be able to tell you if there was like Johnson grass in the field or, pigweed or whatever when they were harvesting, or Canadian thistle, or any of those sort of noxious weeds. Different areas will have different hay, straw, and manure options. Some areas may have rice straw, some barley, some wheat. Others might even have, like marsh hay, which may be ideal since the weeds that grow in salt marshes require salt to germinate. So it's essentially, like weed seed free to an extent. Of course, speaking of weed seeds, you can ask the farmers how clean the harvest was on, like things like straw, and if they would be concerned with weed seeds from that grain being contained in the straw itself too much. Some weed seeds from wheat or whatever are almost inevitable. You just don't want to plant a stand of wheat wherever you mulch if you can help it. Then, of course, there are other mulches out there, such as leaves. Leaves are not my favorite solo mulch. We're going to talk more about them tomorrow, but they're not my favorite solo mulch, as because we do a lot of lettuce mixes, and as much as the soil loves leaves love lettuce mixes, but they can be great for around crops they can't contaminate so much, such as like peppers and tomatoes and longer season stuff. Sometimes just driving around looking for leaves or leaf bags piled on the side of the road is adequate, but again, more on leaves tomorrow. Sometimes just checking in with your local waste management office for mulches, you can become a drop point for leaves or wood chips or whatever, so they don't have to pay the tipping fee at the dump. Same with arborists, with their wood chips, they may be able to bring those straight to you, and they may prefer that. Now, in terms of a mulch, we'll talk more individually about these as we go along, but I don't really love fresh wood chips so much, but year-old wood chips, partially decomposed, can make a great mulch around those same bigger crops like tomatoes, or if you have a lot of compost, a thick layer of compost and then a thin layer of partially decomposed wood chips can combo up nicely. Or I think I've mentioned this one before, but I know for at least a little while that local harvest farm in Western Canada was piling chicken manure on wood chips for new beds and allowing that to break down for a while until it was basically like plantable as a passive, like bed prep technique. That's not a bad idea for utilizing two raw but somewhat potent ingredients to chill each other out a little bit and create a plantable bed surface. Also, hit up the farmers market and just see what you can find out from your local farmers in terms of what's available as mulches for them. I'm not a big fan of getting mulch materials from the dump because you have no idea what's in it, but I've been to the dump many times and just scooped up truckloads of fresh wood chips that I could tell were fresh for free. For wood chips, which I do like to have around perennial plantings more so than annuals, I have chased down many a wood chipper in my day. I will be late for a meeting or whatever if it means catching an arborist pumping gas. I'm not a big hustle culture guy, except when it comes to wood chips. On the grind for wood chips, for sure. In that way, you can also hit up the yellow pages, which I think we call Google now, and search for local arborists, give them a shout. Heck, they may even have piles of decomposed wood chips to offer you for free, which may or may not be worth it, but it's worth checking out. Sometimes on places like Craigslist, you will also find people selling aged horse manure and such. Yes, there is some risk there with persistent herbicides and the like, but if you can haul it and then compost it properly, a lot of that risk will dissipate. Anyway, what are some mulches you've found in your area and how? Let us know. All right, so yesterday we did the keeping the soil covered episode. Then today in the first segment, we did the keeping it planted part. Now in this segment, let's talk generally about disturbing the soil as little as you can in your context. I have already done a segment on what tillage does to soil, but basically the plant roots and the mulch, and all the things are doing a great job of gathering nutrients and sequestering carbon. One of the ways in which that happens is that microbes will inadvertently wrap a little bit of organic matter in a microscopic package of soil particles that they can't very easily access themselves, making that little bit of organic matter stable and less accessible to them. But that's not just a nice stable bit of soil organic matter that can be tapped into at a later date, like a rainy day fund. Soil aggregates also help to keep the soil in place. They help to hold moisture. They help to create habitat for soil organisms. They are incredibly important for soil health. Also incredibly important to soil health, fungi, like mycorrhizal fungi that live in the soil and help protect and feed plant roots, but also your saprotrophic fungi. Those are the ones you tend to see above the ground. Earthworms and other larger creatures like arthropods, beetles, and the rest, those are also important. And all of that is just a long way of saying in healthy soil, there's a near endless array of soil organisms that are critical to a plant's fitness. But when we pulverize the soil, we destroy those organisms and the long-lived packages of soil organic matter that we call aggregates. Then they become vulnerable to bacteria who, enlivened by the oxygen whipped into the soil, eat it all up and release that hard-earned carbon into the atmosphere. Some amount of disturbance is inevitable. I mean, for the moment, one cannot just teleport a transplant into the soil without touching it. We have to dig a hole to make room for a plant. That is not what I consider disturbance. That is just a necessity for growing food. Moreover, some soils do not contain much, if any, beneficial life or soil aggregation, so it's important to insert things like composts and maybe some amendments in there to help establish them, and then, of course, build their populations up with living plant roots. Sometimes compaction is an issue there and may take a few seasons of broad forking to really fix it. So when I say as much as possible at the end of each of these statements, that's intentional. None of these can be approached with dogma. Your soil and the goals must be evaluated properly in the beginning to determine what level of disturbance is right for you and your soil. More to that point, sometimes if your crop list is all directly seeded crops, some amount of disturbance right at the soil surface is going to be essential. For me, I say protect the rhizosphere 4 to 8 inches down, or that would be like 10 to 20 centimeters. That's where the bulk of the soil life is and the soil aggregation is. The top couple of inches of soil, albeit important in terms of erosion, are okay to disturb to some extent as needed, though I should note the more disturbance, the more weeds. So, it's a balance. Anyway, I think that's a good start on these topics, but we can dive more into the nuances of each over time.
I'm not one of the young anymore. Time's got me down. If this is meant to be, then why am I?
All right, I hope you enjoyed that little compilation episode. As always, don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle. Big thank you to the No Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of June, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to Brigitte Taylor. Thanks, Brigitte. Appreciate you. And we'll appreciate you by Continuing our story this week, as you will remember from Monday's story, our heroine this week is Gracie, who was accused of stealing a painting, but after a serendipitous camera angle of a neighbor's house exonerated her, she started to obsess over the idea of being good. You see, she'd always been a good person. She didn't lie, she didn't cheat at school, she volunteered. Whatever you think of as good, Gracie fit that bill. But after this incident, she started to wonder if being good held some sort of special powers. Like maybe it wasn't an accident that she was exonerated. Maybe being good gets you points in the universe somehow. And thus began the obsession that would turn Gracie bad. Or would it? That's next time on Good Gracies. Good Gracies. Good Graces. I don't know. We'll find out. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Introducing America's Workforce Academy, built by Meta. Paid training, a job, and a path to America's future. Because the future is for everyone. Learn more at meta.com/America's Workforce Academy.